Hey, everybody, and welcome in to another edition of the BamaBlitz. I'm Caleb Brooks, along with Luke Robinson, and we will be talking Alabama sports for the next hour. And Luke, we've talked about it all the time, but man, what a time to be an Alabama fan right now. Things are going great. Alabama basketball played last night, started 2-0 on the year, and we will talk about that a little bit. Also recap the Alabama and Mississippi State game from this weekend. A lot to talk about there. And take a look at some of the former Alabama players that are in the NFL right now. So got a great show today. And if you're watching on Facebook, we encourage your comments. Please comment at us. Let us know what you thought about both games this weekend if you watched both of them. If anything's on your mind, just let us know. And we also have a new audience today, 105.1 The Lake. So we welcome them in and are glad to have them listening. But Luke, you went to the game this weekend. I went to the game this weekend. Give me your thoughts on Alabama versus Mississippi State.
Started out really well. Of course, they get up 14-0. Alabama does, and then some things starting to fall apart. There's a mishandle on a handoff that led to a fumble. Mississippi State was never really a threat. And let's go ahead and get this out of the way. It was a bad call in the block in the back of Mississippi State, which caused the shutout. Just a bad call. But the only thing I can say, and again, this isn't in defense of the officials. The only thing I can say is when you do your hands like this as a blocker and somebody goes forward, that's the universal sign for I did it. you know,
and if you can even see on the replay a little bit, he actually put his hands out and then thought about it and put his hands up. But everything's happening so fast. And look, I'm not taking up for the officials. It was not a good call. I don't think that he was really even in position to make the call. And, it was a bad angle for him. But like you said, when you see that right there, it shows that you did it.
And again, those calls are going to happen. If that call had been at the end of the game, if that call were Ohio State, Miami, 2002, it's one thing. This was determining whether or not it was a shutout. So it's not that big of a deal. It does lead to the people who believe in these terribly stupid conspiracy theories that gives them some legitimacy in their own minds. But if you go back and look at the previous week against LSU, you could have LSU got the benefit of every call, as we talked about. So it works both ways, and it just happens. But I don't want anybody to think that we're taking up for the officials there. They just blew the call. They just blew it. They probably blew the fumble too. Although I've rewatched the first quarter and I've looked at that several times. It looks like it was a fumble, but you know what? That's kind of on the Mississippi State coaching staff, because apparently Moorhead, the coach at Mississippi State, came out and said, my guys said don't review it. And why not? I don't understand. You have a challenge, review it. If you think so, you can't review the block in the back. But the other, you just have to call the challenge there. You have to man up and throw the flag. I mean, and risk losing the challenge or whatever it is. It's so hard to keep up with the actual rules are on challenges in college. But that's that.
Yeah, I'm actually for kind of going to more of an NFL module where you have a guy that sits in the booth and can review the play and let you know to challenge or not, and having less reviews in games. I think, and Saturday, me and who I went with the game with, Blake McClellan, who's probably tuning in right now, we talked about, I think there was only one review in the whole entire game. And so that's after I went to the Missouri game that had about 7, went to the A&M game that had about 5. So, it didn't really hold up the game. But review process to me really it doesn't let you really get into the flow of the game. And so I'm for going to the NFL style of you have 2 challenges. If you win both of them, you get a third. You have someone up there, review all the scoring plays up top, and everything else just needs to go, and it's up to the coaches. But that is on Mississippi State. I don't know if it was a fumble or not. You don't really ever get a definite view of if it was a fumble or not. But, everybody's making a big deal about a call going Alabama's way and how that always happens. It's crazy to me how Alabama, who I think has now solidified themselves of having the best front 7 in the whole entire country, hasn't had a holding call in the last 2 weeks.
They've only had one against them all year, and it was Texas A&M.
Yeah.
So, again – but I don't want to give a lot of time to this because it's so stupid to me. And if you're a James Carville supporter in that regard, I mean, more power to you. You're going to have a hard time going through life if you're going to complain about the officials and think the officials always have something out for you. The better teams do always seem to get the better calls. I think this is because the better teams are generally more disciplined.
Yeah.
That's generally how that works.
Well, I mean, everybody's making a big deal about how Alabama didn't get penalized on Saturday. And, I mean, look, you can call holding at any point. There's maybe a couple of other calls they missed, but most of Mississippi State's penalties came from false starts and lining up off sides. I mean, that's what
delay a game.
Yeah, delay a game. I mean,
delay a game took away another touchdown.
It's not like they were sitting there calling blocking the back and holding and, imaginary face mask. Yeah, I mean, none of that was called. And, you look at Alabama. Alabama does a good job. They don't get a lot of delay games. They don't line up off sides. They don't get a lot of false starts. And they played a really clean game Saturday penalty-wise. But, like you said, got off to a really hot start there at the beginning. Really looked like they were going to run away with it. The fumble down there really kind of stopped momentum offensively. Deontay Brown goes out of the game. And I know that Justin Mosley, when he comes on Wednesday and Thursday, we'll be talking a lot about that. But, you could see when Deontay Brown went out, the offensive line changed a little bit. And Mississippi State, to their credit, made some adjustments on defense.
Yeah, Mississippi State, I believe, has the best defense we're going to play all year.
Yeah.
Now, unless we get to Clemson and maybe Michigan. But Mississippi State's defensive line is full of guys who are going in the first round of the NFL draft. I'm going to give them a ton of credit. I'm also going to give them a lot of credit because they got down 14-0 and they didn't quit. They kept playing. And now they ended up getting down 21-0 and didn't quit. They held Alabama to 3 points in the second half.
And they could have given up a touchdown at the end of the game.
They certainly could have. And I don't think that was anything about running it up. That's kind of Saban's MO is I'd rather do this than kick the field goal. And I think that's the way that should be handled. You just run it straight up the middle. And if they don't stop you then, they don't stop you. But don't try maybe a fake field goal, Kirby Smart, right there at the end. Having said all that, another thing that certainly maybe the biggest talk about all this is people going for Tua's knees. And I don't think there's any doubt they were going after his knees. However, I'm kind of like Saban on this. It's not a penalty. It's borderline unethical, but it's not really unethical. It's part of the game. If it's not a penalty, then it's not necessarily that big of it. It's not even unsportsmanlike. It is a penalty in the NFL, and if the college game wants to change it up and make it a penalty, hey, so be it. I understand the safety concerns. Right now, it's not. So I don't blame Mississippi State for doing all they can to shake this guy up. I've played basketball for years. One thing people used to do to me and I would do to other people. If you can't get out on your man and you don't feel like you can get there with your arm out and without fouling him, you sometimes look like you're going to duck under and sort of take his legs out from under him to shake him up. That's kind of iffy, but it's not illegal. And I think this is sort of the same way. And you've got to tackle this guy the best way you can. He's elusive. And you also want to maybe take him off his game a little bit. If they change the rule, then I will certainly say, hey, don't do that anymore. And when you do it, it is considered unethical and should be treated like targeting. Right now, that's not the way it is. So I'm not holding any ill will towards Mississippi State or their players because of that.
Yeah, I'm not either. And the guy that hit Tua that, pretty much got him out of the game came out and said he wasn't trying to hurt him, but he's just trying to make a play. And, he's coming in. The game's going fast. A lot of guys now are taught to go low. You don't want to get targeted on somebody. So, I mean, we don't want them going low, but we don't want them going high. So where do we want them to hit?
Well, then in the NFL, if you look at it, I mean, Clay Matthews had a couple of picture-perfect sacks, in my opinion, on the quarterback.
Yeah.
And he's gotten penalized for driving him into the ground too hard. So, I mean, in the end, we're getting to a point where quarterbacks, I'm sort of kidding. They could be wearing flags in the next 5-10 years. Quarterbacks, everybody else, it's a free-for-all. Yeah. But
or two-man touch.
Something.
It's headed towards that direction with the way that we're trying to protect everybody. And, look, football is a violent game. It's a physical game. You know what you're getting into when you sign up for it. And I understand I'm all for player safety. I think it's important. But at some point you got to realize, this is football. This is, if you want to get protected, go play soccer.
Well, that's true. Although I think there are some studies out there that more soccer players get concussions than football players. Maybe they're more soccer players, maybe whatever it is. But anyway, going back to the game for a second, there were certainly some. I think there was an LSU hangover, without a doubt. And this is so Alabama 2018 of us to nitpick complaints from a game where we shut out Western Division opponent 24-0, who's ranked for the second straight shutout. But we have scored the fewest points we have scored all year in the last 2 games. That's certainly an issue. We do have some guys banged up. Henry Ruggs obviously wasn't on his game. Devontae Smith, he was out there, but he wasn't on his game.
And Najee was in sweatpants in the second half coming out of the locker room.
Yeah, Najee, he had one nice run in there, I think. He didn't have maybe 3 carries. He didn't have that many carries. Yeah. But a guy that if you want to look for a bright spot, Josh Jacobs has turned into the best running back on this team.
Yep.
A team that has Najee, who was the number 1 back in his class, Damian Harris, who was number 1 back in his class, both 5 stars, and then Brian Robinson, who was a high 4-star. Josh Jacobs, who was pretty much an unknown.
Until January.
Until very late. And he just happened to grow up an Alabama fan in Oklahoma. And we got word of this kid. And I heard a little story about it the other day. We like our guys to have certain measurables, certain speed, certain height, certain, you can make exceptions if this guy's a freak and he's maybe a little shorter than normal, but he's fantastic in every other aspect. But Josh Jacobs, one thing we like for our running backs to have is really big hands. And apparently Josh Jacobs has got some of the biggest hands in America. And we got word of that. And we said, okay, we're going to offer him a scholarship. I think Burton Burns was maybe his recruiter. And they said, we're going to offer him a scholarship because Burton was pulling for it. Said, look, you're going to love him. He's got the biggest hands you've ever seen. And he said, and the other coaching staff, some members on our staff said, we're going to offer him a scholarship, but he better have the biggest hands we've ever seen. And I guess he does. Yeah. So he has been playing like a man possessed of late and did a great job on Saturday.
Yeah, you can tell he's worked hard in the weight room, is really, started to grow. And he's been healthy this year for the first time. But we're up against our first break. And when we come back, we will talk a little more Alabama, Mississippi State, and also Alabama basketball. Stay tuned.
How did you get the notification? Oh, you're keeping it right.
Keeping it, yeah. I'm having to do it by myself. Lee just texted me and said that we're dropping the internet connection as well. So,
do what now? I've got it on right here. Are you
no, on the barracks.
Okay. So are we on? We're on though right now. You're saying
not on radio. We're on. Yeah, we're on Facebook.
Like McClellan says, you made a comparison on Saturday. Jacobs is Mark Ingram-esque.
Yeah. He's got cutting ability like him. He's physical, kind of stocky.
I'd say Jacobs may be faster.
Oh yeah, no, I would agree with that.
But I'll tell you, Ingram
and better hands.
When we talk about the how the players did in the NFL, Ingram had a great game yesterday. Of course, he played against the Bengals, and you don't know what you're going to get with the Bengals, but the Saints look awesome. Julio Jones, I didn't realize his fastest player in NFL history to 10,000 yards receiving.
Yeah, 104 games. Impressive.
Yeah, because the next closest is 115 or something.
Yeah, Calvin Johnson.
Yeah. So, I mean, he did it. And, it's not like he's been the picture of health through all these years either.
Yeah, but, he's played hurt at Alabama. Yeah. And, you're sitting up there watching you can just see how Ingram jump cuts. Not Ingram, Jacobs jump cuts all the time. That reminds you, he was just so good at running up towards the line and finding that hole and just, cutting right into that hole. And Jacobs does that a lot. And then he's good out of the backfield too. Caught that touchdown pass Saturday. I really would have liked to have seen him finish that drive at the end of the game. I know he had 20 carries, but we had already shown the Wildcat. I don't really see why not just line up in the Wildcat, take out Mac Jones, put an extra blocker in there, and just run the Wildcat inside the 5. You must have seen the same comment I saw about running up the score. One of the Mississippi State fans saying, y'all need to remember.
See, and he said you need to remember that. We can remember it, do whatever you want to. You hadn't beaten us in a decade. I'm not real worried about it.
What do you want to do? Take the field goal? That's putting points on. That's running up the score.
Well, not only that, what are you supposed to do? Are you supposed to kneel? That, to me, that's just as demoralizing. You're saying we don't even need to do it. Okay.
Welcome back to the Bama Blitz, presented by the Lee Marketing Group Advertising Agency. I'm Caleb Brooks with Luke Robinson, and we've been discussing Alabama versus Mississippi State from this weekend. And during the break here, me and Luke were talking about Josh Jacobs had some Facebook comments, and I made a comment Saturday at the game that Josh Jacobs reminded me a lot of Mark Ingram, and the way that Mark Ingram, had the cutting ability and just the way they run out of the backfield. I think Jacobs is possibly a little more physical than Ingram, and he's a little faster, as you said. And but he's a special guy, and you can tell he's actually healthy. And that's what we were talking about, going into the break is last few years he's dealt with foot injuries, he's dealt with ankle injuries. But this year, and I think it's a little bit due to the fact that he had the least amount of carries. Brian Robinson had more carries than him going into Saturday. All of a sudden, Najee's out, Damien's a little nicked up, and Josh Jacobs is fresh, and you really saw the results of that on Saturday.
It goes back to having this very nice platoon system that Alabama's got at running back. And, yes, you do sacrifice having a 1,000-yard rusher probably. It may still happen because Alabama's going to play 15 games. But you sacrifice some individual awards like that. But there's none of these guys has proven to be a Derrick Henry clone just yet, or maybe even a Trent Richardson in college. So they're all very, very good. You could probably, put all four guys in the bag, pull one out and say, this is your starter and be okay. But I think Damian Harris, certainly as a senior, has earned the right to be the starter and get the majority of the carries. And then it's Jacobs after that. But Jacobs has been playing the best. I mean, I just think he's a great story. Really hoping he comes back next year. I think he is certainly draft eligible, and he could be a draft pick. So we'll see what happens. But I certainly like the way he's playing right now, and he has given Alabama that much needed toughness. That maybe the offensive line is a little beat up. They didn't have their best game, obviously. Tua obviously did not have his best game. The receivers, Jerry Jeudy still did his thing for the most part.
When he had opportunities.
Waddle looked pretty good again. Trying to think of guys who stood out. I thought Raekwon Davis, to me, has really turned it on here. I think he maybe have got a little bit tired of hearing about how awesome Quinnen is. Quinnen was still awesome, but I think that Raekwon may be saying, hey, I'm pretty good over here too.
Do you think a little bit of that has to do with the fact, though, that Quinnen Williams is I think that early in the year when you look at it, Raekwon was getting double-teamed a lot, which was opening up doors for Quinnen. Well, now teams are having to decide, am I going to double-team Raekwon or am I going to double-team Quinnen?
Yep.
And the way Quinnen Williams is playing is you're having to double-team him, which is now opening up some doors for Raekwon. But he played well, and then another bright spot on the D-line was LeBron Ray coming in and had without a doubt, his best game. I think you can see he's really starting to get healthy now after that broken foot.
I've talked about it before. It's always fun to see these guys who are so highly touted. They come in and they maybe get down on themselves a little bit because they are buried on the depth chart just a hair, and they don't get the playing time maybe they thought they would get because they've been a superstar all their lives. But then when they finally get over that and the light comes on for them, it's fun to see that because you see exactly how good they can be. And sometimes it goes the other way. You get like a guy like a Kendall Sheffield who ended up transferring because he just thought, okay, well, I'm not getting the playing time, so I'm going to get out of here. He ends up at Ohio State. He's getting burned about every week right now. But, so maybe if he had toughed it out, things would have been a little bit better for him. I heard something not a while back, heard it this weekend, that Minkah Fitzpatrick had said to Raekwon, again, this is not verified, but it was practice legend, that apparently he said to Raekwon, because Raekwon is a world-class trash talker. I'm talking about, and he should be. He is a huge human being. He can afford to be a trash talker. Apparently, Minkah said to him, if you talked as well as you played, you would be unbeatable. And that sort of helped him propel him a little bit last year. And then maybe this year he was getting double teamed, and that hurt him a little bit. And then Quinnen's having such a big year, and now it's pick your poison. And let's not forget Isaiah Buggs is having a pretty doggone good year in his own right. He made a huge tackle on Mississippi State's first drive.
Yeah. Isaiah's another guy that dealt with some injuries last year, and right there in the two playoff games really picked it up and started playing well on the front. And I think that was a combination of a lot of things last year. Alabama dealt with injuries throughout the year. Lost Terrell Lewis and Christian Miller. Isaiah Buggs was dealing with injuries. Raekwon was dealing with injuries. Middle linebacker had its issues as the year went on. This year they've been able to stay healthy. And, it was a young defense early. And I really think, we talked about it last week, the Arkansas game was a big game because they gave up 31, but it may be the best thing that happened to this team because they really got focused after that. And since then, they've given up 10 to Missouri, gave up basically only 14 to Tennessee, and then have had 2 shutouts since then.
Yeah, and probably a pretty good chance for a shutout this weekend, regardless of who plays at quarterback, if Tua plays or not. Because I've seen, it was funny, the Citadel tweeted out something that, we got
hilarious.
next, and it was a guy flexing, and it looked like a guy that I don't know could.
It looked like a nerd. I mean, that's what it was.
Could carry the tuba in the $1 Million Band. But I mean, hey, get them credit for being good sports about it. So, would you play Tua or not this weekend?
And you guys can comment on Facebook. Let us know what you think. I say no. You're playing the Citadel. You've got 2 big games coming up. The Iron Bowl's big because it's the Iron Bowl, and I want to see him go out there and torch that secondary. And then you got Georgia coming up, and I think you need to get him healthy for those 2 games. I know that, and if he plays, that's fine, but I say he plays 3 or 4 drives, and then he's out.
Yeah, I'm leaning that way, and again, it's all selfish reasons for me. I mean, I want him to set records. I want him to do his thing. I mean, I feel like this is a once-in-a-lifetime player that we have at a position where – geez, we've never seen anybody like this for us, and maybe ever. And so I want to see him do his thing, and I understand the ramifications of his potentially playing. But if we were playing somebody just a little better, I'd be more worried about this. But I believe that surely to goodness we can block the Citadel's defensive line enough to give him enough time to have 3 drives, get 3 touchdowns, and get out of there.
Yeah,
that's fine with me. But I'm also of the Saban school. Saban is sort of, if you're not debilitated, then you're playing.
Yeah.
And he plays them maybe a little bit longer than he should sometimes. It's a very NFL-type mentality, but it's worked for us. So I also am a little concerned that if he doesn't play, I just don't want I don't want to lose any mojo we have going on, because then you bring him in against Auburn. I'd like for him to go out there for 3 drives and prove he's not going to be hurt, and then maybe feel a little better, because you could go in against Auburn and maybe be a little skittish.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. Me and you've talked about it over the last week about how, we talked going in before this new injury, which I think is really more of just a bone bruise on the knee. But before it came about, how I wanted to play him because you want to keep that rhythm. We talked about how NFL teams, they get the bye week. They're kind of out of sync when they come back. So, if he's good enough to play, then I say play him for 3 or 4 drives. That's max. And, I feel like this week's one of those weeks where we're not going to show a lot. You line up, you run the football at the Citadel, you put up 40-something points and get out of there with a win and get ready for the Iron Bowl coming up.
Justin Mosley has a pretty good comment here and some good research. Did some research last night, he says. Charlie Ward and Testaverde won a Heisman while sitting a game due to injury, so there's that. At least there's some precedent to it. True, that's fine. I still think he'd be the favorite to win the Heisman, play or don't play against Citadel. He's probably not going to put up enough stats against Citadel to really make a hill of beans. So I think that's not going to factor in as far as I'm concerned. I'm just selfish. I want to see the kid play as much as I can. I've only got him for the rest of this year and next year, and that's it.
Yeah, look, it's up to Saban. It's whatever he wants to do. I also wouldn't mind just seeing if Jalen's healthy enough, him starting and getting a chance to start a game.
It's funny because we were told Jalen could go in emergency. He didn't look like he could go either against LSU or against this week. And
he was moving around a little more in warm-ups, but it wasn't.
I know, and
it wasn't good.
I mean, I'm more anti-playing Jalen this game than I am anti-playing Tua, because Tua's going to sit back there.
I got to interrupt you. We got to go to a break. When we come back, we'll talk more Alabama, Mississippi State right after this.
Yeah, but just to continue what we're saying, Tua's going to sit back in the pocket and drop dimes, and Jalen's going to look at the first read. If it's not there, he's going to take off running, and then somebody's going to hit him doing something.
Well, but he's actually looked better in the pocket of making more reads this year when he's been in. Now,
still a first read kind of thing.
And if he's not healthy, if he's 85%, then I don't want to play him. And I'm talking about Jalen. If Tua's 85%, I think you're okay to play him. Especially with him being the starter. But with Jalen, I want to get him healthy for any kind of emergency situation against Auburn or against Georgia. But I don't know. Mac Jones didn't look very good. I know that. And I'm okay with playing him against the Citadel. But and look, we talked about it. They made some adjustments. They started bringing 7 every single play. They were bringing guys from the outside. It looked like what people did against Jalen last year, and they were just bringing them from the outside, and we couldn't block them. But, they made some adjustments. Credit to them. It was kind of a tough situation for Matt to come in, and they were pretty much selling out to the run when he came in, and if we just didn't have time to throw the football much.
And, I hate this game every year. You don't get credit for beating them. They generally, I look back at their last few games before us, like the last two, it was La Tech and then some other dump truck 2 years ago, and maybe a very mediocre A&M team.
We basically get two teams off a bye.
Yeah, and so we play LSU, which is probably the most physical game we play on average every year. And LSU puts as much emotionally into that game as anybody does. I mean, Alabama and Auburn is sort of emotionally charged both sides, but LSU puts lock, stock, and barrel into that game, coming after you, doing everything you get. And then we come back, we're always beat up after that game.
Yeah.
And then we always play these guys. Now, granted, Mississippi State doesn't have the talent in general to play year in, year out with us. This particular year, I still believe they have – unless we play Clemson, they got the best defense we're going to face. Sweat is a monster.
You brought up Michigan, but I think Mississippi State's better than Michigan.
Yeah, Michigan's pretty strong, though.
Michigan's strong, but they're strong in the Big Ten.
Yeah.
There's a speed level difference. And, I mean, look, that Mississippi State defense, seeing them actually in person on Saturday, they're fast up front.
That Bush kid from Michigan, though, and Gary, I mean, they got some players.
They do, but they don't have as many. I mean, I'm talking about Mississippi State's linebackers, like those outside linebackers that were coming off the edge could come.
Sweat and Simmons are disgusting.
No, they are. I wish we'd have got
started
Simmons.
Anywhere. Yeah.
Simmons a little thug. They're trying to start that fight after the game.
That video with Simmons and that girl just, I mean, it seems like everybody in the world's forgotten about that too.
Oh, I know.
And I guess it's because he plays at Mississippi State. If he played at Alabama or Ohio State or USC, I mean, that'd still be a thing. But
we got 5 seconds.
Okay, go ahead.
Welcome back to the BamaBlitz, presented by the LMG Ad Agency. I'm Caleb Brooks, along with Luke Robinson, and we're going to continue talking about Alabama and Mississippi State for the rest of this segment. And then we'll get into some Alabama basketball and looking at how some Alabama players in the NFL did yesterday. But, Luke, we were talking about it over the break. And, when you look at it, Sweat and Simmons for Mississippi State, they're just nasty up front. And they're right up there with Raekwon and Quinnen right there in the middle, I think, as the two best defensive tackle, interior lineman combination in the country. We talked about it last week. There was more scouts at this game than there was for the LSU game, and it was because of that, because of what they had up front. You said it earlier, I think, and we said it all last week too, that was going to be the best defense that we played this year. LSU's good. Mississippi State's defense is very, very good.
Yeah, and they do have they essentially had an off week. La Tech did give LSU all they wanted earlier in the year, but they essentially had an off week going into this, and they were hitting their stride. And we looked a little beat up out there.
Yeah,
we just did, and thank goodness we have a lot of depth because we needed it. Mississippi State played a whale of a game, and I don't know it's 24-0, a shutout, and blah blah blah. I was impressed with them. I really was. I'll give their coaching staff a lot of credit because usually if you get down 14-0 to Alabama in Nick Saban's time, it's a problem. I mean, it's a problem to come back, and things could really snowball, and they didn't snowball on them. They really held their own in the second half, and I give that staff a lot of credit because he's taken a lot of flack this year.
Yeah.
I mean, he's looked terrible on the road, and he did get shut out in this game, but they
had some fight in them. I mean, they were playing hard all the way to the end.
And that's what I think you look for in a first-year coach.
Yeah, without a doubt. You got to see how his players answer. We're going to get to some Facebook comments right here. Adam Russell Long comments that Irv Smith is stepping up. I mean, Irv has played really, really well, especially, I think, since the Arkansas game. He really started getting it going then. And, I mean, it takes, like we've talked about, it takes a quarterback able to get the tight end the football. And we've got a guy that can do that right now. He also commented and said that Johnny Dwight played big at times with Ray. I mean, both of them played. Both those guys played good. Toolman Kirk said Johnny Dwight played the best game I've seen him play in an Alabama uniform.
True.
Yeah, I mean, he did.
It's not a.
Yeah, I mean, look,
they're sort of like being world's tallest midget. I mean,
we're talking about how the defense is developed, but they're actually developing depth now on that front too, which is huge. You got Federi Mathis is playing more. Johnny Dwight's playing more. when you have that and you can get guys like Quentin Williams and Raekwon Davis some rest, especially here towards the end of the year, that could really, really come up big when playoff time comes.
I'm with you, and I don't mean to downplay it because he did have a good game against an SEC West opponent. So, I mean, I give Johnny Dwight a lot of credit there. And again, I thought the linebacker play was pretty good. There was a missed tackle by our buddy Anthony Jennings that led to Mississippi State. It really gave them just about all their rushing yards.
Yeah.
It really did.
It really kind of kept them out of the negative. I mean,
that's what I'm saying. They probably finished fewer than LSU had, and they had what, 12?
Yeah, they had 12.
Okay, so it was a missed tackle, and you don't see that very often. But again, Anthony's been playing well of late, so I feel like he's coming on at a good time. You know, a lot of people like to talk about this week in the SEC and the bad matchups, and this is how bad the matchups are this week in the SEC. Tennessee, Missouri is your CBS game of the week.
And it's one of the only SEC games, isn't it?
True. And that's awful, and I get it. But another way to look at this is a lot of teams play their some of their scrub or the easiest game on their schedule first game of the year. The SEC just does it later in the year. I think it's pretty genius. I mean, it works out for us. I don't mind the Citadel. I don't mind Liberty because, again, those guys get a check from this. I'm not trying to be out like we look at this in an altruistic way, but we also gives us time to get ready for the stretch run. It gives me a chance. If I want to take my kids, I can go on the cheap because I'm looking at Iron Bowl tickets right now. I got 4 kids and 1 wife. That's 6 tickets at about, I mean, the bare minimum I've seen, $250, $300 a pop. That's a big deal if I want to spring for that. For the Citadel, I'll go there and they'll just be making tickets rain.
No, you can walk outside the stadium and they'll just hand them to you.
So, I mean, I think that's okay. I mean, give some other people a chance to go in there. And I'll tell you something else. You were there. The students ought to be ashamed of themselves.
Yeah, I was going to bring that up.
Keep leaving. I mean, I get it that the game's over and you're going to see Mac Jones and it's going to be up the middle and it's not fun. But you're a student. I mean, you don't have any responsibilities to go home to. You've got what, 7 home games, 8 home games a year. You're lucky to get tickets a lot of times because now this the lottery thing. It's not just show up with your ID like in my day. It's embarrassing.
No, it was very embarrassing.
I'm fine saying, okay, here's what we're going to do now. It's either first come, first serve for students. No more block seating, none of that crap. Or we're going to take away some of y'all's seats and give them to some donors because at the very least, if they leave, at least we're making extra money off of them.
Yeah, no, the upper deck student section wasn't ever halfway full at any point during the game on Saturday. And I actually tweeted something out and said, for people that are complaining about them taking away seats up in the south end zone, this is why. And I mean, it is. And outside of a big game, it'll be filled up for the Iron Bowl. It'll be filled up for LSU next year. It'll be filled up for Tennessee. But outside of that, that's what you've seen for most of these games recently, and that's why they're taking the seats away. I mean, it's just like in basketball. There's a reason they're taking seats away. It fills up for Oklahoma and Kentucky and those teams, but, you saw the crowd at App State last night, 8,000 people there. You need a 10,000-seat arena.
I totally agree.
I mean, and that's where we're at in football right now, and, the students should be ashamed, but the fans in general should be ashamed. I looked at halftime, and people were just clearing out. I mean, they're getting out of there. It was cold, okay, but I was there. I stayed all 60 minutes. I spent my money on a ticket. I'm staying and watching the game. And one day, it may be 5 years from now, it may be 15 years from now, people are going to be missing these times where we're dominating everybody and playing well. And I saw Kirk Cousins tweeted and said something about, is it boring being an Alabama fan? How's it boring being an Alabama fan right now? All these other fan bases, we'll have Auburn Blitz come on after this, and they'll complain about how they're not winning enough, but it's boring being an Alabama fan right now winning.
I'm going to tell you, I will take boring over what I had in the early 2000s all day, every day.
You want us to go back to 03 Shula and go 3-8 again? I mean, would that be more fun?
Look, it'd be more fun probably to listen to this because I was going off on some pretty famous rants back then, way before we had a show. So, and it would have to be censored. I can tell you that. Don't get me started on Mike Shula and his insistence on having the jumbo package out there. But anywho, no, it's not boring at all. We get a tweet like that. It seems about once a week, and it's really just a stupid comment. I mean, I couldn't be any more thrilled than what I am. So there we go.
Yeah, no, I mean, I'm people are looking for so many excuses now. It's always the refs, and we're off right now on the radio, by the way. I missed the break, but it's always either the refs. You know, if you ask some people, the refs are the only way that Alabama's won in the last 11 years. You know, Alabama doesn't get any – there's no calls ever against Alabama, even though, you know, you look back in the 2016 national championship game, they got a bunch of calls in that game.
Well, they had a pick play to win it.
Exactly.
And not only that, like you said, we've only had one holding call on our defensive linemen all year long. I mean, you got Raekwon Davis and Quentin Williams, and you've had one – and Isaiah
back
Muggs.
2016 with that defensive line that we had, and that they never got holding calls.
And again – I think it works both ways that, yes, if you're a better team, sometimes you get the calls. But also, if you're a better team, sometimes they cut the other team some slack, like, well, they should fight through that kind of thing. It's human nature. Officials screw up. I mean, you should have heard, I'm there at the Alabama-Appy State game last night. I mean, I had great seats there right by the Appy State bench. And the Alabama fans go nuts every time there's a call. And I'm thinking, that's a foul, man. He traveled, man. I mean, What do y'all? I mean, you can complain, but and the Appy bench, every time we got a call, it was just, oh my God, this is egregious. This is awful. I mean, it's a hard way to go through life like that. You know, I mean, just everything somebody's out to get you. Now, sometimes you just foul. Sometimes you commit a holding penalty. Sometimes you pass interference. Sometimes you don't. Sometimes you do and you don't get called. It's funny, too. I've always thought this about football and basketball. When people play basketball, my coach used to always teach me, hey, look, if you're trying to come around a screen or something, grab the guy you're following, grab his shirt, or just, do something to hold up somebody, or, work an elbow in, but don't get caught. So we're teaching people to do that, right? We're teaching people to do this, and then when they either do or don't get called, people have a complaint one way or the other, but we're teaching them to do it.
Yeah. We have 5 seconds.
Okay.
Welcome back to the BamaBlitz, presented by the LMG Ad Agency. I'm Caleb Brooks, along with Luke Robinson, and we've been talking Alabama and Mississippi State. About to get into some Alabama and Appalachian State, which Luke got into a little bit over the break on Facebook Live. Luke went to the game last night, watched Alabama and Appalachian State. And, Luke, I know App State went 15-18, but that's a team that returned a lot of guys from that team last year. They have a guy that can really shoot the ball in, I can't remember, Shabazz. Yep. Shabazz can really put it up and shoot it. And he ended up with – how many points did he end up with last night?
Well,
21. He had 21 points last night for them. So it was a good App State team. I know that I had a guy, an Auburn fan, comment at me on Twitter last night that they went 15-18 last year. Well, Auburn finished 11th in the SEC 2 years ago and then won it last year.
Basketball is so year to year now.
Exactly.
But this team's pretty doggone good. Holding them to 73 points, I'm kind of shocked.
Yeah, I mean, they scored 125 in their first game, and granted, it was Mars Hill, but they scored 125 points.
When's the last time we scored 125?
Exactly.
Against whoever?
When's the last time we scored 100? I mean, I think we did last year maybe once, but, I mean, it's not like we do it often.
Now, tell me, 2 years ago, the South Carolina game, quadruple overtime.
Yeah.
I don't think we got 100.
No, we didn't get 100 in that game.
So, I mean, if you can't do it quadruple OT.
Yeah.
But anywho, so going back to this, look, Abbey State, and here's the thing, it seems like everybody else can catch fire in Coleman but us.
Yeah.
When other teams, and maybe it's just our defense, but see, I have a hard time believing that too, because this has been through the years, various coaches, that other teams come in there and just light a fire on the nets. And this team was coming out, and they were also hitting everything. And sometimes it just goes that way.
Well, the first 5 shots they made were 3-pointers.
Well, one of them was a bank.
Yeah.
Which was off balance and just sort of throws it up. And hey, sometimes you make those. Meanwhile, another thing that hurt Alabama a lot, and stop me if you've heard it before, free throw percentage. Herb Jones was 5 of 13 from the line. He is a brilliant player in a lot of regards, but it's amazing to me that he's just not more of a scorer right now. I think the story that came out of this for me, though, was Kyra Lewis.
Yeah.
And gosh, that kid's tough.
Yeah,
now he is thin. Okay. He is slight, but he's the youngest player in D1 basketball. He is going to get stronger. He's going to get better. I am very worried that he's going to run out of gas somewhere, either towards the middle of the season or very late in the season, we are going to have to figure out a way to get him off the court some more. Now, I think conventional wisdom is get him on there, let him learn, let him do. But he's the kind of guy that gives his all out there. He's going to run out of steam. And this college basketball season is a long, grinding season.
Way longer than high school ball.
Yeah, and especially when you get in the SEC, and this league's so much better this year. He's a dude, though. He's a player. Now, he's got to get stronger. I mean, I mentioned it, and we can pick his game apart if you want to, but I saw him follow his shot on numerous occasions. He had, 8 of Alabama's first 10 points, 2 3-pointers.
Yeah.
Probably, this is sacrilege to some people out there, probably a better shooter than Colin Sexton. Sexton just had some dog in him. I mean, Sexton enjoys playing the game as much as anybody. And Kyra Lewis doesn't have that mentality just yet because he is the youngest player in D1 basketball, and that's a thing right now.
Yeah, no, he was a very, very bright spot. I think also last night, for it being his first game off of a foot injury, Dazon Ingram played well, especially down the stretch, and went 6 for 6 from the free throw line. A guy that shot 60% last year. So, and we needed that. You look at it, if Alabama would have just hit half the free throws they missed, they went 26 of 43. They win the game by 15 points. And, it's something that we talked about all last year, needing to hit free throws, and just you didn't see it last night. When you go 26 of 43 shooting 60% from the free throw line, we're very, very lucky that App State shot 56% from the free throw line last night. But, Dazon, I think him coming off the bench and being able to provide 8 points was a very, very, it was a good thing. Yeah. And, and
we're going to need him because we're going to have, like I said, we need some people to take some minutes away from Kyra Lewis. I don't mind playing him a lot early, but as soon as we get in the SEC play, we got to work him back in. It's almost like starting a new season for him. John Petty, I'm waiting to see that Petty from high school, and he had a moment in this game where he ends up throwing one down on top of somebody. The play didn't count, but it was one of those things where Chris Stewart even said, okay, that's what we've been waiting to see. He can shoot the three. It's not the prettiest shot you've ever seen. It's pretty unorthodox, but he's pretty good at it, especially at home. But I saw him in high school attack the basket on several occasions. We hadn't seen that yet. And so seeing him just do that, go, okay, he's got it in him. Now you just got to hopefully this will lead to more times like that.
Yeah, we talked about it a lot last year. These guys that came in as freshmen, they were used to having the ball in their hands. Herb Jones, John Petty, even Alex Reese when he was at Pelham. They were used to having the ball in their hands, more than anybody else. And last year they had to adjust to that because we had Colin Sexton. Now we've got Kyra Lewis who's going to have the ball in his hands. I mean, you could tell the offense was not flowing when he didn't have the ball in his hands. And, I'm not trying to bash anybody, but Avery Johnson Jr. comes in and pretty much provided nothing last night. And he's going to have to step it up and play well because he's going to have to take up minutes for Lewis.
Let me tell you, so I'm sitting – we had really good seats. I'm sitting on the floor. I'm on this end. He gets wide open. An App State defender just loses his guy, gets confused, goes in the opposite direction of where Avery Johnson Jr. is, wide open in the corner for a three, and it's an air ball of ginormous proportions. I saw it and I said, I don't even know. I thought for a second that may even be an alley-oop to somebody. But, then I saw him follow through and sort of shake his head like, man, he's just going – somebody's going to have to hit that.
Yeah, no, he's a guy that when he gets hot can play. He's not a terrible player, but really since about SEC play of last year, he's just been struggling, and he's carried that over into this year. And hopefully he can get out of that because Alabama is going to need him to play well as the year goes on, especially with what you were talking about with Lewis.
Let's also talk about Tevin Mack. I don't know, how are we on break? Do you know?
No, yeah, we're good.
Okay, Tevin Mack. Look. I expected a little bit more of him. I think he's got to get his feet up under him. He finally made a big play, and then immediately as he dunked it, taps the backboard like something you do in a pickup game and gets a technical.
That's just a petty foul.
It's just a petty technical foul?
Yeah.
No, listen, but it's a rule.
I understand
so don't do it.
But my thing on that is we've got a bunch of people making these rules that act like these 18 to 23-year-old kids shouldn't have some kind of emotion. It's not like he came down, got in the App State guy's face, started talking crap.
I'm kind of okay with it because really it's also to kind of protect him. You slap it and then you break your hand or you do something like that. I know that may be overreaching, but I'm just saying I think it's fine. I'm fine with him getting a tech on that. I also think it's a moment where somebody can say, okay, when you do something good but take 2 steps back, it doesn't help. You lose a step. So just do the good thing and move on. I'm not saying act like you've been there before. I mean, I'm fine with a little celebration. Colin Sexton used to do a little shimmy every time he made a layup. I'm fine with a little bit. I'm fine with some emotion, especially in basketball, which is charged about 100% of the time. But slapping the backboard is something we all know you cannot do. I mean, this is not new. It's not like they instituted this rule this game. Nobody else I haven't seen anybody else do it this year. Yeah. So why do you have to do it?
No, yeah, it was. I mean, with it being a technical foul and everything, it was a poor choice on his part. Like you said, we're waiting on him to get going, and he's a guy that led Texas in scoring a few years ago. And somebody texted me last night and said that Tevin Mack looked bad, and I said, look, he didn't play all last year. Let's let him get a few games in, and if we're 8 games into the year and he's still putting up 2 points coming off the bench, then it's something to worry about.
And we still have a lot of chemistry to work through. We are a middle-of-the-pack SEC team. Don't let a 2-0 start fool you. We're about to lose some games coming up, maybe against Northeastern. This Northeastern team is picked to win their conference that we play on Thursday in Charleston. We've got one of those really tough tournaments coming up where you've got a bunch of teams who are all pretty doggone good, but none of them are Duke. I mean, that's the thing. And so when we lose to a Virginia Tech or a Purdue or whomever we will eventually lose to in this tournament, because I don't think we're winning it, somebody's going to say, oh, we should have beat that team. They're pretty good. They're solid. They're not awesome. They don't have Zion Williamson, but they're solid teams. And we are a middle-of-the-pack team. I'm not saying keep your expectations really low, but just don't lose your mind when we lose some games. We're going to lose games.
Yeah, and I mean, basketball's a sport you're not going to go undefeated in. I don't think Duke's going to go undefeated in. I know that they look really good, but you can have a bad night. Going on the road is very tough, especially when conference play gets going. Mm-hmm. So teams are going to lose some games, and Alabama's going to play some good teams. If we're able to beat Northeastern, we'll play Virginia Tech, who – they're going to have revenge on their mind. I know it was last year, but Alabama knocked them out of the tournament last year in a really close game that, if some calls go their way, they're probably coming out on top of Alabama. Yeah. So, that's not going to be an easy game if they get to that point. You look at Alabama's schedule, and Alabama's schedule is, you don't see a lot of, there's not any Dukes and Kansas and North Carolinas.
It's a smart schedule.
Yeah.
Okay, because, again, you play your Northeasterns. This Appy State team is going to help Alabama in terms of strength of schedule. They're no Mars Hills.
Yeah.
They've got some they've got some good enough teams where everybody's going to present a challenge. And that's all you want. Look, I'm not saying it's the most – Kentucky is always going to have the best schedule, or Duke, because they're always going to have all these made-for-TV moments. But it's a good schedule for what Alabama is. And we're – hopefully we'll get better. Kyra Lewis will be back next year. And then, God willing, we get Trendon Watford. Maybe, there was a lot of talk about Petty coming out this year. I don't see it yet. And maybe Herb Jones doesn't come out if his shooting doesn't improve. Now, in the NBA, they go a lot on potential, and he's got a 7'2" wingspan, and you can't teach that. And he can jump out of the gym. But we're going to lose Dante Hall. But if you bring a Watford in, bring a couple of these other guys we've signed in, we're getting better. We've got to build to some chemistry. It took Bruce Pearl a long time. This is year 5, and he's finally got a team that's pretty experienced. Last year, had a team that was experienced, but they had a nothing schedule to begin with, and it propelled them to a good year in the conference. They ended up winning the conference. So now he's got a team that's made up of guys that have been in the system for a long time. And this is year 4 for Avery Johnson. We've already been to the tournament once. That's how you judge basketball.
Yeah.
Did you go to the tournament? That's how you judge it.
No doubt. And, I look forward to seeing how this team develops. Avery Johnson said it last night that this is a game that last year we may not win. Had to really come up strong there at the end of the game and made some plays. They were down 57-51 at one point, went on a huge run, got up 64-59, and really never looked back. But Alabama will play Northeastern Thursday, 1 o'clock on ESPNU. They're in the Charleston Classic.
And we'll have Brian Pasnick on tomorrow.
Okay, good deal. So we'll have Brian Pasnick on tomorrow to talk some basketball. But right here, before we end off, we're going to take a look at some Alabama players in the NFL and what they did this weekend. We'll start off with Eddie Jackson with the Bears, who you got to say the best move that ever happened for him was Nick Saban moving him to safety. And he got drafted after breaking his ankle or breaking his foot against Texas A&M his senior year, and really for the last 2 years has been one of the top 5 safeties in the NFL. They beat the Lions yesterday 34-22, and Eddie Jackson had 2 tackles for loss and also had a sack in the game yesterday. So really good game for Eddie, and it's been really fun to watch him playing for the Bears.
And I don't know I think he's either the only guy or one of 2 guys who have returned both a fumble and an interception in the same game. Wasn't this game, but that's just kind of the playmaker he is. He's a highlight reel kind of safety.
Yeah, no, and I mean it's been very, very fun. Like I said, watching him grow in the NFL, and he's playing with a really good defense in Chicago right now, who's playing very well, playing better than I think a lot of people thought that they would play to this point in the NFL season. Mark Ingram for the Saints yesterday, he's been back for a couple weeks, but he really came back yesterday. And, he's a guy that a lot of people early in his career labeled a bust, and he's now in year 8 in the NFL and is playing very solid for the Saints and
over
got over 100 yards. Yeah.
Hey, they probably got the best 1-2 combo running back in the NFL.
Yeah, no doubt. He had 104 yards on 13 carries yesterday. And, when you put him along with Kamara, and then you've got Michael Thomas on the outside to go along with Drew Brees playing quarterback, who went 22 of 25 yesterday. That offense is one of the best in the NFL, if not the best. I think the Rams are up there, and I think the Chiefs are up there, but the Saints are right there with those 2 teams. Julio Jones really starting to get things going now. He's had 2 straight weeks with a touchdown after not having one through the team's first 8 games. And him and Calvin Ridley, really good combination there for Matt Ryan. Falcons didn't have a great game yesterday against the Browns, but the team is 4-5, and Julio has amassed his 5th 100-yard game of the year yesterday and played really well.
Fastest player in NFL history to 10,000 yards receiving, and he did it by 9 games.
Yeah, I mean it's impressive. He's averaging almost 100 yards receiving per game in his career.
That's ridiculous.
It is. He had 7 catches for 107 yards and a touchdown yesterday. He now has 10,094 yards in his career, and he's going to keep getting better and better. He's really closing in on the Larry Fitzgerald mark that he actually broke Terrell Owens' record yesterday. Yeah. Terrell Owens was 2nd receiving yards. He's now 3rd, and Julio is heading up there. And here soon he'll be passing Terrell Owens as well. But, it's good to see Julio starting to really find the end zone. Derrick Henry had really his first really solid game of the year yesterday for the Titans. He had 11 carries and ended up with 2 touchdowns yesterday. And, it's been rough on him. A lot of people thought this was going to be his year in the NFL. They've kind of changed what they did offensively from what they did last year. Yeah, and, Deion Lewis is kind of fitting their system more. But Derrick Henry really starting to pick it up and play well, so it's good to see him. But he had 11 carries and 2 rushing touchdowns yesterday. Also was watching a little bit, and they would go empty some and line him up at the slot receiver. They didn't throw him the ball any, but it's interesting to see a 6'3", 240 guy do that.
And he did go Wildcat for his second touchdown.
Yeah.
And again, this is probably the time Derrick Henry can pick it up a little bit when the defensive lines are a little beat up. You don't want to tackle somebody that's as big as you.
No, he had 58 yards yesterday and led them in yards per carry with 5.3, and a good win for the Titans yesterday over the Patriots. Yeah, did not see that coming at all. It blew them out. Yep. And that's now twice this year that Belichick's faced either a former player or assistant, and they have not fared very well against them. So, surprise yesterday, Robert Foster, 3 catches for 105 yards for the Bills. Now, he didn't come in until the 3rd quarter, but me and my brother argued about this all offseason. I said, Robert Foster and Cam Sims are going to make NFL rosters, and they're going to play.
Yeah.
And it's taken him a little bit, but those 2 guys were talented. And people forget Robert Foster was the number 1 receiver on Alabama's team going into 2015 year and got hurt, tore both of his rotator cuffs against Ole Miss. And after that came back and had Jalen Hurts for 2 years. And not to knock Jalen, but Jalen locked in on one guy, Calvin Ridley.
Yep.
And you saw that with the stats. Cam Sims, if he wouldn't have been on the IR and gotten hurt, would be playing for the Redskins.
That's right.
And now Robert Foster steps up and has his first career 100-yard receiving game for the Bills. And to me, with his speed and ability, can be a very special player for them.
Yeah, I hope so. It would be fun to see him get a shot like that and maybe do some things in the NFL that either he wasn't allowed to do at Alabama or he wasn't able to do because of injury or whatever.
And then Clinton Dix yesterday with the Washington Redskins, his second game with them after getting traded from the Green Bay Packers, had 8 tackles with a pass breakup yesterday. Still learning that defense a little bit, but he's with a really good defensive system that has a lot of Alabama players.
Well, they shut down a pretty potent Tampa Bay team that, by the way, is the the one team that has beaten New Orleans unbelievably in game one.
Yeah, I mean, and with Ryan Fitzpatrick.
I mean, it was nuts. I remember watching that game thinking, oh, my God.
I had no clue. I mean, and going into that game, you thought the Saints would run away with that one,
Oh,
especially
no
with
question.
Fitzpatrick starting. So a good game for Ha. You're really starting to see him get going with the Redskins. He produced a lot with Green Bay when he was with them. Kind of got unhappy there towards the end. There's a lot of stuff going on in Green Bay right now, and won't be surprised to see Mike McCarthy get fired at the end of this year. They've changed general managers, and going to be a lot of turnover in Green Bay this offseason. He was part of it with his contract running out, kind of expressed that he didn't want to sign back after this year because of everything going on, and I don't think they were going to pay him the money that possibly the Redskins or somebody else is going to pay him.
No, I think you're right. And so good for him to go to a team loaded with guys that he's played with in college.
Yeah, you know, you got Jonathan Allen,
Deron Payne,
Sean
Deion
Payne,
Hamilton,
Ryan Anderson.
Ryan Anderson.
Then you got Cam Sims and
Sims
Ari
on the practice
Kwanjo
squad.
on the other side. So, it's really fun to watch that team play because of all the Alabama guys they got. But, I mean, it's like we talked about last week. I told you that I saw a tweet where a guy had his kid, was asking him where all these kids played in college, and they flip it on one game.